Modern schools say they prepare children for the future. In reality, they were designed to prepare them for factories. And now that factories are run by algorithms, we're left with a generation trained for a world that no longer exists. Today, we're talking about why capitalist schools kill creativity by design. Hello, my name is Gene. I'm building a club to help people navigate our AI cultural revolution. It is Gildrim. We will master the new AI tools, support people displaced by the machine, and lead them into the cybernetic future. Our topic today is why capitalist schools kill creativity by design. Let's begin. For most of history, creativity was survival. You had to improvise, you had to invent, you had to adapt. Then industrial capitalism arrived and decided improvisation was inefficient. Schools became the quiet training grounds for orderly minds. The problem is that we no longer live in the industrial age. We live in the age of AI, where the only thing that cannot be automated is original thought. And that is the very thing the system trained us to suppress. Modern schooling did not begin as a sanctuary for imagination. It began as a solution to a logistical problem. Expanding industrial economies required predictable citizens. Predictability is easier to manufacture than genius. So the architecture of the classroom reflected that priority. Rows train posture before they train thought. Bells condition reflex before they encourage reflection. Standardized pacing teaches the child that time belongs to the system. Even before a lesson begins, the structure communicates the message. Fit the pattern. This was not accidental. The early architects of mass schooling in Europe designed institutions that could produce disciplined populations at scale. Industrial America imported the template because it worked. Factories required workers who could follow sequences without improvising them. Offices required clerks who respected hierarchy. Schools supplied both. Creativity introduces variance. Variance disrupts throughput. Systems optimized for order treat deviation as friction. The safest student is the one who internalizes the pattern quickly. The child who lingers on unusual interpretations learns to compress them into approved forms. Over time, imagination adapts to survive inside constraint. The irony grows sharper in the age of automation. Artificial intelligence excels at pattern execution. It performs structured tasks with relentless consistency. The very traits schools have rewarded for generations, compliance, repetition, procedural fluency, are now the easiest to replicate digitally. The system trained minds to bow before order. The machine perfected order. Now, the only scarce asset is the untamed imagination the system quietly trained us to suppress. Walk into a typical classroom, and you can almost hear the hum of an invisible conveyor belt. Desks aligned, clock visible, objectives written in tidy bullet points. The bell functions like a shift change siren. Knowledge is portioned into units, delivered on schedule, tested on schedule, archived on schedule. This structure rewards rhythm over reflection. The student who moves at the prescribed pace advances smoothly. The one who slows down to explore a strange idea risks falling behind the production line. Curiosity becomes a timing problem. Teachers often sense this tension. Many enter the profession with creative instincts of their own. Yet pacing guides, benchmarks, and standardized assessments narrow their latitude. They are managers of flow as much as mentors of minds. The system measures coverage, not wonder. In an industrial century, this made economic sense. Factories needed synchronization. Corporations valued workers who could perform repeatable tasks without drifting into improvisation. Schools mirrored that need. They trained children to operate within systems rather than redesign them. Now the factory floor has gone digital. Algorithms handle logistics. Software automates compliance. Machine learning systems execute structured processes without fatigue or complaint. The human who is trained to behave like a reliable component discovers that the component has been replaced by code. What remains uniquely human is not repetition, but recombination, not compliance, but interpretation. Yet the classroom that shaped generations still whispers the same instruction. Stay in line, deliver on cue, do not disrupt the flow. Originality rarely announces itself politely. It arrives sideways. It reframes the question. It notices something the rubric forgot to include. In a system built on standardization, that is inconvenient. The strange answer slows grading. It resists tidy categorization. It demands judgment rather than checklist evaluation. Over time, students detect the pattern. The expected answer earns a swift nod. The unconventional one invites scrutiny, not hostility usually, just hesitation. A slight tightening of the room. Children are exquisitely sensitive to social temperature. They learn which responses generate warmth and which create friction. The lesson settles quietly. Agreement is efficient. Divergence is costly. This conditioning does not require harsh discipline. A raised eyebrow, a lower mark, a gentle suggestion to stay on topic does the work. The creative impulse begins to self-edit before it ever reaches the page. Imagination learns to pass through a filter designed for safety. That filter scales beyond school. In corporate life, predictable thinking becomes professional armor. In digital platforms, algorithms amplify content that resembles prior success. Pattern recognition governs both the grading rubric and the recommendation feed. Safe replication circulates more smoothly than bold departure. By the time generative AI produces competent essays, illustrations, and code, many humans have already trained themselves to think in templates. The machine excels at templates. What it cannot replicate easily is the leap that feels slightly improper at first. Yet that leap is precisely what schooling taught us to suppress. The modern school did not emerge from a painter's studio. It emerged from a state office. In early 19th century Prussia, reformers sought a disciplined population that could strengthen the nation. They built an educational structure that divided the day into strict intervals, emphasized repetition, and elevated obedience into a civic virtue. The aim was coherence, a unified culture, a reliable citizenry. The model proved effective. Students learned to respect authority, follow sequences, and internalize hierarchy. The classroom became a rehearsal space for adult life in a bureaucratic society. Order was not merely encouraged, it was ritualized. When this system crossed the Atlantic, American industrial leaders saw its utility immediately. Factories required synchronization. Railroads required coordination. Expanding corporations required clerks who could endure routine without rebellion. A standardized educational pipeline promised a steady supply of compliant workers. The architecture barely changed because it did not need to. Bells structured attention. Grades quantified performance. Age cohorts moved together like synchronized units. The student who aligned with the timetable advanced smoothly. The one who resisted felt friction. In an era of mechanized production, this blueprint fueled extraordinary economic growth. In an era of automation, the calculus shifts. Software now handles repetition with tireless precision. Hierarchical workflows are increasingly digitized. The system once trained citizens to obey machines. Now machines execute obedience better than citizens. What remains scarce is not discipline, but daring. As American industry consolidated power in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, schooling became less a civic experiment and more an economic instrument. Industrial titans such as Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller funded educational initiatives that emphasized uniform standards and measurable outcomes. Their motives were not cartoonishly villainous. They believed order produced prosperity. In many ways, they were correct. Large corporations required scale. Scale requires predictability. A workforce trained to follow procedures without improvisation keeps production stable. Schools supplied that stability. Timetables mirrored factory shifts. Standardized assessments resembled quality control. A child's report card functioned like an early performance review. The trade seemed rational. In exchange for steady wages, workers accepted structured roles. In exchange for institutional funding, schools accepted curricular priorities aligned with industrial needs. Wonder became extracurricular. Imagination moved to the margins. This arrangement powered a century of growth. Assembly lines expanded. Office towers rose. Middle-class security became attainable for millions. Yet the cultural side effect was subtle and cumulative. Generations learned to equate success with compliance inside predefined systems. Now, digital platforms and artificial intelligence reward something different. Independent creators leverage software to build audiences without corporate permission. Entrepreneurs combine tools in unexpected ways. Generative models accelerate execution but cannot supply vision. The irony is sharp. The corporate order that once demanded disciplined minds now competes with decentralized creators whose advantage lies in precisely the imagination that schooling treated as excess. When imagination is trimmed in childhood, adulthood grows careful. A culture shaped by compliance tends to prize smoothness over brilliance. Public discourse becomes polished but cautious. Art drifts toward formulas that have already proven safe. Risk is framed as irresponsibility. Novelty is tolerated only after it has been domesticated. This restraint once blended well with stable institutions and slow technological change. Incremental improvement was sufficient. Careers unfolded along predictable tracks. Expertise accumulated gradually inside established hierarchies. Then the ground shifted. The smartphone compressed attention. Social platforms accelerated feedback. Artificial intelligence began drafting text, composing music, generating images. Creative barriers fell almost overnight. Anyone with a laptop could produce at scale. In theory, this should have unleashed a renaissance. In practice, many adults hesitate. They have been trained to seek the correct method rather than invent a new one. Faced with open tools, they search for instructions. Faced with possibility, they look for permission. The result is cultural disorientation. Technology invites experimentation. Conditioning favors caution. Institutions struggle to adapt because their leaders were shaped by the same standardized schooling. They manage change rather than author it. A society that has practiced restraint for generations finds boldness awkward. It treats creators as eccentric rather than essential. Meanwhile, AI iterates without embarrassment. It recombines patterns relentlessly. The cultural cost is not loud decline, it is quiet narrowing. A reduction in the range of ideas people feel comfortable pursuing, a thinning of the imaginative air. Each generation inherits more than wealth or debt. It inherits assumptions about what is realistic. Students raised in standardized systems learn early that approval follows conformity. Success is defined by metrics, grades, test scores, credentials. The formula becomes familiar. Perform well inside the structure, and stability will follow. For decades, that bargain held. Parents who thrived under this model pass it along. Study hard, secure a respectable job, avoid unnecessary risks. It is practical advice. It is also calibrated to an industrial economy that rewarded institutional loyalty. Now automation compresses that pathway. Entry-level cognitive work is increasingly handled by software. Data analysis, drafting, basic design, Even coding tasks are accelerated by AI systems. The predictable ladder shortens. The response is often to double down, acquire more certifications, accumulate more credentials, stay within the approved channels. Yet outside those channels, independent creators deploy digital tools to build audiences, launch products, and collaborate globally without gatekeepers. The contrast is striking. One path narrows toward institutional scarcity, the other expands toward networked experimentation. The limiting factor is not access to technology, it is psychological permission. Generations trained to value safety above exploration adjust their ambitions downward when the old promises weaken. Dreams shrink to fit perceived stability. The ceiling lowers gradually until few remember how high it once felt. A culture that teaches its young to optimize for approval may find that when the approval system changes, they have forgotten how to imagine beyond it. When a generation is trained to avoid friction, adulthood becomes unusually quiet. Institutions begin to equate stability with virtue. Corporations reward those who manage risk rather than those who provoke change. Bureaucracies favor consensus language over disruptive insight. The tone of public life grows careful, measured, professionally restrained. Silence starts to look like harmony. In digital environments, this pattern scales. Recommendation algorithms amplify what resembles what has already succeeded. Content that aligns with familiar templates circulates smoothly. Divergent ideas face higher resistance, not because they are wrong, but because they do not fit existing engagement patterns. The system begins to resemble the classroom at planetary scale. Predictable input produces predictable output. Safe opinions earn validation. Risky propositions trigger friction. Over time, people internalize this logic. They pre-edit their thoughts. They soften their claims. They learn to anticipate reaction before expression. It feels prudent. It feels mature. It is also constraining. Then a genuine crisis emerges. Technological disruption, economic shock, cultural fracture. Improvisation is required. Vision is required. The population hesitates. Years of conditioning favor caution over invention. Meanwhile, artificial intelligence systems iterate without social anxiety. They test variations endlessly. They optimize at speed. The contrast is stark. Machines experiment relentlessly. Humans, trained for order, deliberate carefully. A society that mistakes silence for health eventually confronts a paradox. The very stillness it prized becomes the obstacle to renewal. The strange twist is this. Just as machines learn to think in patterns, humans were trained to do the same. Generative AI systems digest enormous data sets and produce competent outputs in seconds. Essays, illustrations, code, marketing copy. They excel at recombination within established structures. They are tireless clerks, flawless interns. They follow the bell better than any student ever could. This exposes the quiet flaw in industrial schooling. For generations, it rewarded structured output, predictable reasoning, procedural fluency. It trained students to perform tasks that now sit squarely inside the automation zone. The advantage that remains human is not repetition, but interpretation. Not compliance, but judgment. Not linear execution, but imaginative synthesis across domains. Yet those capacities were treated as decorative extras in classrooms optimized for throughput. Many adults now experience AI as a threat because it performs so well within the framework they were trained to master. The discomfort feels technological. It is partly educational. The displacement began long before the algorithm. The same tools that unsettle the compliant mind empower the imaginative one. AI can draft, simulate, generate, accelerate. In the hands of someone willing to depart from templates, it becomes leverage. In the hands of someone conditioned to replicate patterns, it becomes competition. The collision is not between humans and machines. It is between two philosophies of formation. One shapes obedient operators. The other cultivates authors. Only one thrives in a world where code handles obedience without complaint. We now face a quiet fork in the road. One path preserves the industrial template: more standardization, more metrics, more attempts to optimize students for roles that software is steadily absorbing. It is a familiar strategy. It feels responsible. It also accelerates irrelevance. The other path reorients education toward authorship. It treats students as potential creators rather than future components. It rewards synthesis across subjects. It tolerates friction. It accepts that strange answers may signal emerging insight rather than error. Emerging technologies make this shift plausible. A teenager with a laptop can design a game, compose music with AI assistance, publish essays globally, prototype software, build a following. The barrier to creation has collapsed. The barrier to courage remains. If schools continue training for compliance, graduates will compete directly with systems built for compliance. That contest is unwinnable. If education cultivates taste, narrative vision, ethical reasoning, and imaginative recombination, technology becomes an amplifier rather than a rival. This is not an argument against order. Structure matters. Discipline matters. The question is what they serve. In the industrial age, they served production. In the AI age, they must serve creation. The machine can execute instructions. It cannot decide which world is worth building. If we want a culture capable of greatness rather than mere stability, we must train minds that are willing to risk invention. The future belongs to those who can author it. Capitalist schools were engineered for order. They succeeded. They produced disciplined workers who powered an industrial century. But the 21st century runs on adaptive intelligence. The traits once suppressed are now the only durable advantage we possess. If we continue training children for predictable output, AI will outperform them. If we cultivate imagination, curiosity, and synthesis, technology becomes a partner rather than a rival. The system that once rewarded obedience must give way to one that rewards authorship. The future will belong to those who can create what algorithms cannot anticipate. If this resonated with you, like the video and comment below with your experience of school and creativity. Subscribe to follow our work as we navigate this shift together. Like the video, comment below, and subscribe to the channel where we help creatives build community in the age of AI. And until next time, remember, a grand world awaits.